I take it the independent Ufo network isn't likely for a concept then, is it? Is it sort of an amalgamation that brings the groups together for conferences or something? Or do you actually do investigation?
Well, I don't do anything on the help out with the video.
I see.
It's really Rodney, with Phil, and Alex is
Oh, I've got it right. What name is way in the back? I just swear I see it.
police it, they can arrest them on suspicion of it. They've got a load in there. How much money did she make? Yeah.
Finding it very interesting. Do you video all movies?
I look after the before library.
Everything upstairs is, yeah. Now, if you did it,
granddaughters are one having to do it before.
Yeah, it's quite a sort of bit I must say, I think there's too much political insight. I think they spent less time sort of arguing about who's going to do what, and more time actually concentrating on the subject.
I've got no time for it.
So that's what I say.
Also, one thing about a blog going down, he was totally denying that Kate was made a contact with me. Whilst in ours, I kept looking at the saying around the new forums, which is government agencies. Big question internationally, it's like military reality, feet on the floor, you know, sort of bang bang, they're different world altogether. Well, the former Dutch government.
And there's a case called Draco Fells Draco Fells. And eventually places to go. In a way, I am picking up right now from where I left off yesterday, but I'm also, in a strange way, picking up where Bud left off with the whole question of the anomaly and the inexplicability of a phenomenon that a 35mm camera with a celluloid film could take pictures of a beach in Australia in which people were standing physically, they thought, and nothing appeared. the whole issue of what is the physics, what is the intelligence that we are involved with that can move things through walls and create the phenomenon that was in Australia is part of what keeps us all tantalized and provoked in our work. I'm going to start back where I left off yesterday. I'm going to go through some different alien types. I will also try to just give you some insights that are really not mine, but are some of the insights from abductees who really are the only ones of us who seem to have had any hands-on, possible close-up contact with at least something that seems to be interfacing between the intelligence involved with our planet and us. It's my own personal opinion that the small grays are not the intelligence in control of what is happening, but that the small grays would fall into the category of androids, some kind of biological creature that has been programmed for certain work tasks on this planet. And as one a former Navy pilot said to me, who was involved in his own strange abduction case, they're just bellhops. They come and they take us where we are supposed to go and they bring us back. And the slide on the screen is involved with the woman that I shared yesterday, who stood with her husband in a pasture in 1980 in Missouri. And through binoculars, they watched these two small gray beings with what appeared to be a lizard guy and a Bigfoot literally float or somehow move a large black cow out of that pasture into some kind of a craft, and then the entire scene disappeared. Disappearance and disappearance is an aspect of the phenomenon that none of us really clearly understand. What is interesting is this woman did not know when she was watching with her husband across the field with the binoculars that she herself would become a subject of examination. And this is a drawing that I worked out with a police sketch artist in 1990 with this woman in a particular memory that she had to retrieve through hypnosis because she had amnesia and missing time. And it involved the small beings, and it involved this lizard type, and it's the mixture of the species. The mixtures in many different people's memories from abductions, and the fact that in the 14 years since I got into this phenomenon as a TV producer and as a writer, trying to just make sense of something that was extremely strange affecting our planet, I began receiving drawings, literally from all over the United States, Canada, from people who were saying, I saw this in the back of the barn. I saw this near my car parked in the driveway. And over time, as I would look at one drawing that was coming from California or another drawing that was coming from New Jersey, two completely different coasts, and knew these people had no knowledge of each other. And I'm looking at all of this on a desk, and I'm saying there are patterns here. So I'm going to begin today and go through different alien types as they have emerged from patterns of reports to me in drawings that, for the most part, haven't involved hypnosis. No human likes the idea of a non-human intelligence having the ability to pluck us or earth animals at will in beams of light and subject us to examinations and harvests of blood, tissue, sperm, and eggs. Some abductees say they understand that the purpose of the alien mutilations and abductions is to create a part human, part alien hybrid species, which is the hypothesis that Bud Hopkins has. Some abductees even report being shown what they call baby things, which receive sustenance from chemicals extracted from animal fluids. Such thoughts are repugnant to us, and most people reject it all as impossible. But the exact idea of extracting something from the fluids that are harvested from our planet may be a key to understanding the worldwide animal mutilation mystery and the worldwide human abduction mystery. Abductees report that another alien motive is to study our biology, our emotions, and our mental reactions. If so, then the experimenters might need to remain hidden. Otherwise, they would interfere with their own investigation because their public presence among us could overwhelm normal human social functioning that they are studying. Abductees, including an environmental scientist in New England in the United States, also insist there is interdimensional penetration from another universe that has a consequence of its physics, the characteristic of popping in and out of our reality. The scientist basing his information on alien encounters says he has learned about other spectral dimensions. Spectral refers to spectrum such as electromagnetic spectrum, gravity spectrum, and so on. The frequency at which atomic structures vibrate varies from one spectral dimension to another according to him. The scientist says alien technology can arbitrarily change atomic frequency rates as they change dimensions, something like rheostating atomic density up or down from one universe to another. That is why he says alien humanoid androids and craft can move into mountains and oceans and through walls and closed doors and closed windows as if they weren't solid, the way we humans experience our physical reality. And that is perhaps how the aliens can float solid human bodies through walls and closed windows, like this woman from Central California who said, "I was lying in bed at night awake. I was levitated several inches above the bed and was then pulled through the bedroom wall. I got the impression that I was pulled through by a strong force that grabbed hold of my feet. As it happened, I began to lose consciousness and my last memory was of my legs disappearing into the wall. It felt like my legs were being tickled or caressed by 1,000 moving feathers. There was a definite physical feeling attached to moving through the wall." She also said that a tall, non-human being explained to her, and this is a quote, "The universe is built on sound patterns, which is why so many different world dimensions can exist in the same space. Each is on a different frequency or carrier wave. If there is a disruption in a world dimension to the point that you destroy the carrier wave that it exists upon, you create a hole or tear in the frequency that cannot support dimensions above or below it. Each frequency, besides maintaining its own world dimension, also supports or holds in place the one above it and below it. Everything is interdependent," unquote. This California abductee thinks that our planet is facing an environmental catastrophe and that the alien intelligence involved in her abductions is trying to help us. Whatever alien motives are involved, it seems as if something is forcing us to be aware that it is here, even if it disguises or lies about its reasons. Perhaps humanity is being confronted by concepts so abstract and alien to our logic that we are unable to perceive the implications offered. Or perhaps thousands of years in Earth time are only a few days of research for beings from another universe trying to establish a foothold in our space-time dimension. In my work as a television producer in the last 22 years, and as a documentary filmmaker and as a writer, in the last 14, since I did A Strange Harvest, my first step into this strange phenomenon, I have received hundreds of letters and drawings, as I told you, and what I'm now going to begin is a pattern of reoccurring descriptions from people in different parts of the United States that are represented in this particular presentation from about 15 cases. And we will begin with the most commonly described, which are about 4 feet tall with large black eyes, gray-white skin, flat face, only holes where a nose and ears would be, and a straight line for a mouth. This was drawn based on a conscious encounter in a desert in New Mexico in the 1940s. Many abductees have the impression that these are biological robots or androids programmed to do work for other beings, the intelligence behind all of this that perhaps we have yet to encounter. This drawing is based on a fully conscious encounter in Georgia in 1951 when a boy of 8 years old encountered these beings. He said, materializing in the air and coming toward him, and he began to run. It is this small type that is also most commonly described as the ones retrieved from crashed discs in the 1940s. Alleged autopsy reports describe the creature's biological makeup as insect-like, but containing a chlorophyll fluid found in plants. One military man a couple of years ago said to me, "We did not know if we were dealing with smart bugs or smart plants." That reason alone may have been a reason for a policy of silence by the United States government. They didn't know what they were dealing with. A triangle inside a circle, like the symbol on the blue uniform, are often reported. This drawing is by a Missouri sketch artist based on the description of an abductee who still lives near Springfield and is still being abducted to this day. Now when you look at this, note the strange feather-like design in this crescent. A similar symbol was drawn by another Missouri abductee. Even though it doesn't have the same orientation, it is something similar, and we have to assume that people who have suffered trauma, who have undergone amnesia, then undergo hypnosis, that many times their drawings may only indicate a direction that we should be looking, that they may not all resemble each other because of the imperfections of our own memories and the trauma event itself being dredged up through hypnosis. This drawing is by a Missouri sketch artist based on the description of an abduction and an abductee near Springfield also. Some abductees feel that these big black eyes are actually artificial coverings, as we might wear sunglasses to screen out sunlight, and that underneath are cat eyes, like this drawn by a New Jersey woman who is black and American Indian. She remembers a 7-foot-tall, black-haired male who took dark shields from his eyes that covered this vertical slit pupil. He did so prior to an exchange that she said reminded her of a sexual encounter, but did not involve anything physical. And for those of you who are familiar with the abduction literature, even in your own country, there have been, every once in a while, descriptions of some kind of what people say seems to be an energy exchange that takes place between them and whatever these taller beings are. This vertical slit pupil has been reported in many abduction cases, including this drawing by Judy Doherty, described in my documentary, A Strange Harvest, and my book, An Alien Harvest. As for those of you who weren't here yesterday, Judy and her teenage daughter watched a brown and white calf lifted in a pale yellow beam of light from a Texas pasture into a craft where small gray creatures like this, with what they called snake eyes, yellow with a vertical black pupil, excised tissue from the calf. Judy also said under hypnosis that the alien humanoids were concerned about a chain reaction caused by our nuclear experimentation, which could cause disruption in other worlds and dimensions which they, the aliens, were trying to prevent, which one way or the other, at least it resonates with the environmental scientists in New England talking about other frequencies, carrier waves, and the fact that one carrier wave universe may interrupt or interact or be affected by another. Other large black-eyed types are said to be the color of cardboard, or tan, or beige, or some color that is not gray. The California female Caucasian who drew this being said that the skin was the color of cardboard and that these were the, quote, doctors who always gave her medical and gynecological exams. Her case is also filled with the smaller little gray beings, which she also felt had nothing to do with what was going on beyond getting her to and from where she was supposed to go. Underneath the beige triangular bib, she says, is a small black box that has been reported in other abduction cases that these particular alien beings use in their work for unknown purposes, but that she thought it had something to do with keeping her in check physically while they were examining her. Not necessarily paralyzed, but unable to move easily. There is another 5-foot-tall type that abductees describe as being the scientist or companion always present during their examinations. It is usually described as having a head that rises slightly like a mushroom, where the front is coming back narrow and it widens like this. This one was drawn by the Central California abductee who was taken through a wall and is depicting herself here in this particular case when the being is asking her to go forward into the craft for an examination. This is the New Jersey abductee's drawing of the very tall male who had this black widow's peak, who removed these black coverings from his eyes to reveal vertical pupils surrounded by a yellow iris like a cat's. Certainly this is a humanoid figure that we would recognize probably on the street. Do they have anything to do with the overall strategy behind all these other beings or not? She had the sense that they were at least in charge of much of what was going on. But the problem is we are dealing with some kind of a non-human intelligence that regardless of what it tells us in an abduction, what can we as humans, apparently on some kind of a petri dish being studied by them, what can we believe and how can we get a handle on objective truth? In this close-up of the New Jersey abductee's drawing of this being, you can see that she is depicting some kind of an odd badge on the left. It's not the triangle and the circle as is the most commonly reported. It has these overlapping triangles, which later she said, I think there's something wrong. She says, I don't think that the triangles were closed. She ended up redrawing them in an overlapping triangle, which I think can be seen in the next one. And you can see the triangles aren't closed, there's triangles in the bases. And she said that she remembered something about this signifying the merging of two worlds, but she did not know which worlds or why. This abductee that was with the tall, dark-haired ones has this very large nose, which has been depicted by Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler in their documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, in the book that was written at the time of the release of the documentary of the same title. And I think it's interesting to note that for whatever reasons, the being that was drawn in the 1974 first edition of that book by men who were working on a documentary in which they were working with the Department of Defense in the United States. The drawing had a very large nose, vertical pupils, a headdress that had folds in it, what appeared to be some kind of tassels hanging here, and the being is depicted as holding a rod in the left hand in the drawing in the book. And when I had a chance to interview Emenegger about this in 1983, when I began work on the HBO project called UFOs, the ET Factor, I said to Bob Emenegger, did you put that drawing in the 1974 book as a red herring to throw everybody off? Because up until the early 1980s, there was very little that had been described except the small gray beings. And he looked straight at me and he said, no. He said that drawing is based on photographs and film taken of the landing at Holloman Air Force Base. That was supposed to have been one of our first encounters with beings in which there was some communication. He said that the large nose was what he saw in the photographs, and this tall being, or not so tall actually, in about a 5'3", 5'2", 5'3", 5'4" category, was also drawn with a large nose by a man named William Cooper in the United States, who has become controversial in his presentation. But I want to say to you that when I first talked to William Cooper in December of 1988, after he had first surfaced on the Paranet and the CompuServe networks in the United States, prior to his becoming a very notorious character, that the material that was in the computer release has, since that time, in some cases, actually been reinforced by independent sources. It's very possible that part of Bill Cooper's story could be true, that he did see photographs and that he was somehow privy to some kind of a briefing paper or stories about certain aliens in 1972 when he was in fact stationed at Makalata, Hawaii. And perhaps part of his covering up many things about that story is because whatever he did so without what is called the need to know. We'll never exactly understand the whole story, but the reason I show this drawing is he said that this was his best effort based on photographs, several that he had seen in a file. It is similar to the New Jersey African-American woman's drawing that I just showed you. It is also similar in an odd way to the Emmenager drawing in the 1974 edition. And subsequently, there have been other abduction cases in the last 5 to 7 years in the United States when people have discussed encountering a being with a very large nose. Again, you can say that in the whole issue of screen memories, which Dave Jacobs and Bud Hawkins think is a part of this whole phenomenon, we could be being presented with an array of characters to test us, to monitor us, whatever. But Occam's razor takes the most logical, simple approach. There may be different beings with different motives. And I think one of the most interesting footnotes to this aspect of the large-nosed being was something Emmenager said to me sitting in his living room back in 1983. He said, Linda, you would do yourself a favor if you studied Sumerian and Assyrian history as it relates to the large-nosed beings and their relationship to our planetary history. So for whatever it's worth, for those of you who haven't looked at the Sumerian and Assyrian possible relationship to taller beings coming here and teaching us, you might find that area of our history interesting and remember some of these drawings from abductees as well as Bill Cooper. This was a taller, blonde woman. She was 6 to 7 feet tall. She was associated with the large-nosed being and with the dark-haired, widow-peaked man. But her eyes were described as being like a cat's, no whites, with vertical pupils, and she did not have the overlapping triangles. She had on some kind of color bands. And in a closer drawing, you can see those sort of vertical cat-eyed pupils. There was another abductee who saw these drawings after they had been made in another session, and she became quite emotional and said, my God, that's who I encountered in another time. What is the relationship, if there is any relationship, between these 6 to 7 foot tall blondes with eyes like cats that are blue or yellow? Travis Walton had blondes with yellow eyes in his particular abduction case. These very large nose beings that have come up now several times, and without question, the widowed peak black-haired is the rarest, and the most puzzling in many ways are these blondes. Now, a tall, caped being met a husband and wife at the door of a disc-shaped vehicle at the beginning of their abduction from a highway near Longmont, Colorado in late November 1982. The husband, a commercial artist, drew these images while under deep hypnosis, and this was his depiction of the craft they entered at the request of the tall, caped being. Once inside, the smaller gray entity with long arms and 4 very long pointed fingers that trailed off into either nails or something hard at the end did the examination of the husband. The husband said that he was laid out on a hard rectangular table with bright lights above him. His wife remembered being surrounded by these smaller gray-colored beings who touched her all over her body, especially her breasts and her stomach, and inserted something very painful into her vagina, which enraged her. The husband drew the being who examined him and insisted there was a, quote, a silly collar, as he put it, which did not make sense for someone on a spaceship, unquote. The husband also said that the skin was much grayer than what he had colored under hypnosis. This may or may not have been one of the beige or cardboard-colored ones. Collared capes have occasionally been described by other abductees as well, including the Cimarron case, which I detailed to some extent in An Alien Harvest, in which a mother and her 5-year-old son watched 2 white-suited beings in what they thought were jumpsuits next to a cow in a northern New Mexico pasture. The cow was bellowing, and she had stopped to yell at the men to stop hurting the cow. The next thing that she and her son, who did not lose consciousness, knew was that more than one light began coming toward their car. The mother lost consciousness. The 5-year-old remembered being transported in some way in this blinding light into a room. She was taken to what she thought was an underground facility down in New Mexico near Las Cruces, in some kind of a room there, where she felt that she was given a very painful vaginal examination, as the woman in Colorado had described. There were different beings in that room also. She saw the typical smaller gray ones. She saw others she didn't like at all. And then suddenly, coming into the room, she said, were beings that were 7 feet or taller, and that they had no hair, and that their skin was a yellowish green, and that they seemed to be in charge of everything that was going on. And she screamed at them to let her go, and they told her that what they were doing was more important than her inconvenience, whatever that means. A Pennsylvania man encountered a somewhat similar being with a kind of smashed nose, somewhat of a similar shaped head with these vertical pupils, wearing a collared cape again, but remembers the skin as more of an orange cast, and that the yellow eyes had a very distinct vertical pupil. He's drawn it as coming down a hall in his house, and then the close-up. There aren't two beings. He's drawing one as the way he saw it in the long, and then when it got closer. He also encountered a gray that seems very typical, and a blonde humanoid, he said, reminded him of a Nazi character because the blonde seemed very strict and in charge. Some investigators argue that these must be humans in league with the gray aliens for some unknown purpose, that they have nothing to do with something extraterrestrial or other dimensional, but that they are coming from our own military. The Pennsylvania abductee in this case, and others who have been involved with this particular kind of short-haired blonde, say that they sense a distinctly non-human quality about these blonde humanoids, so the abductee themselves place them in another category, even though investigators are trying to pursue the possibility that this has something to do with our own military. There's no one that I know who has any answers to this strange juxtaposition of the gray beings and these short-haired humanoids. That same man has also, outside of his bedroom window, seen a disc like this with pulsing lights around the perimeter. And one day, he said, a helicopter-shaped vehicle stopped right outside his bedroom window, motionless and completely silent, and it reminded me of Sheriff Lou Girodo of Los Angeles County in southern Colorado. He was frustrated in his investigation of animal mutilations in the 1970s and said that he and other law enforcement officers had come to the conclusion that the mutilators were, quote, creatures not from this planet, and that the helicopters were not terrestrial, but were camouflaged so that whatever this alien presence is can work where it wants to, how it wants to, and that we will not recognize its presence because it is disguised by things that we recognize as terrestrial. A Maryland abductee, adult female, has also been plagued by helicopters over her home. They do make a lot of noise, and yet in one case, the helicopter, like the Pennsylvania abductee, came down within 12 feet of her lying on a lawn chair in her backyard. She had the impression that there was something in it, but it seemed to be opaque. And I said to her, at 12 feet, the noise must have been horrendous, and how in the world were you able to stay there in that lawn chair without it tipping over? And she says, well, Linda, there wasn't any wind, and I don't remember any noise. Well, that's not a terrestrial helicopter at 12 feet above the lawn chair. I don't know what it is, but there are these anomalous descriptions among the abductees. In this particular case, the woman wrote about this humanoid, quote, pure blonde hair, not white, very serious, with command, black eyes, no pupil, calm, powerful, benevolent authority, but lethally serious with command. This female abductee initially insisted this blonde was from another planet, but now she is confused about whether or not this could be somebody from our own military in the United States who, for whatever reasons, is associated with some of these small gray beings. The issue of human military involvement with aliens and involvement with human abductions is one of the biggest and most disturbing puzzles in this complex mystery. It continues to become more confusing, not less, and I don't know any researcher who really has any clear understanding of what we're dealing with, but I'm presenting patterns of what people are drawing and saying they have encountered in the same craft, often with the small gray beings. There are also reports of tall entities with very large rust-colored eyes containing gold flecks surrounding enormous vertical black pupils. They are often compared to a praying mantis insect. This was drawn by the Central California abductee who was taken through a bedroom wall by small gray beings that she identifies as the androids who work for and with this praying mantis type. She had the sense in his presence after she said initial terror when she thought she was going to die because it was so hideous to her, that she actually said she felt suddenly overwhelmed with sadness. And she did not know if the being was sad about her or if there was something that she felt from the being that was emanating to her that was so profoundly sad that she said she wanted to cry, but she has no content and no context for the feeling of sadness. Here's another drawing of a praying mantis by the Georgia man who encountered beings that I showed you earlier floating out of the air, the typical gray ones. This man says he remembered it appearing, he woke up in a start and remembered seeing this being that he also said reminded him of a praying mantis standing in his bedroom door. And after that he subsequently both has detailed memory of some of the things that happened to him without hypnosis, and other parts of his memory are blocked. He is a fascinating case, and I'll be going into him in some depth in my second volume of Glimpses of Other Realities next year. There are also reports of reptile or lizard humanoids with green, scaly hides. This was drawn by a Missouri abductee. This type has been described, interestingly enough, by several females in abductions. The eyes are depicted as being those large yellow, black, vertical pupil things. I only know of one man, a male, who said he woke up in a start under his bed and that there was a being, he's estimated, based on the height of his ceiling, that the creature standing next to his bed was 7 feet tall. But he said he could see through the being into the rest of his bedroom. Well, how can anything that's translucent be strictly biological? Is it possible that we are dealing with very sophisticated holographic technology in some of these cases from an intelligence that is monitoring us or testing our reactions to things and doing so with an advanced technology that has to do with light and electronics that we don't understand? I don't know, but in one of the cases with a man, the being that resembles this was translucent. Adding to this menagerie are descriptions by abductees of large and small, hairy, ape-like creatures that do the bidding of everyone else. It has been suggested by some abductees that large Bigfoot creatures might be part of the alien presence, perhaps biological robots like the small grays, created to do physical labor on this planet. This sketch is based on the reports of Ron and Paula Watson of Springfield, Missouri, who watched this Bigfoot creature, a lizard creature, and those two small beings remove the cow from the pasture across their road. There is also the notorious Man in Black, described since the 1950s as warning people not to talk about their UFO encounters. This drawing was made by a man from England who moved to New Jersey and gave this drawing to me last year based on a very recent encounter in which he woke up at night to see this being standing next to his bed. Now, part of this drawing, the strange, silly hat and the clothes that are totally out of character with the current social milieu of whatever people are wearing, that has been one of the common things about the Men in Black. They're always described as being in clothes that look to other people like they came out of the 20s and the 30s. Another interesting thing is that Bud Hopkins had described doing a hypnosis session a couple of years ago with a woman who said, "It looks like it's wearing a bow tie." And Bud was very puzzled by that. And then in the hypnosis session, as it went closer, she said something like, "Oh my God, it's moving its head. It's not a bow tie. Those are the eyes. Well, maybe this strange, whatever this being has got over its eyes, which doesn't even pretend to cover the big black slanted eyes, maybe it is some piece of technology or gear or something that these beings under some circumstances put on their eyes, and it looks like a dark bow tie. Some people, like the Central California abductee, report beings who emerge through tears or holes in the air of their bedroom or come through walls, windows, and other solid objects. This has led many people, including investigators, to question whether any of these experiences are real at all. Moving through solid objects seems dreamlike to the human mind because there is no context in which to relate such action to solid three-dimensional reality as we know it. But if the aliens have technology to change atomic frequency, as the environmental scientists suggested, that might explain some aspect of this phenomenon. In one case, the abductee from Georgia, completely in full consciousness, watched a hole open up in his Manhattan apartment to reveal gray beings with large dark eyes on the other side, including a female holding a small, frail baby creature for the man to see. The female communicated that the baby creature was part him and part whatever she was. In other words, a hybrid produced from sperm collected during his many abductions. He told me he had felt since he was 20-some years old that he was being used by like a sperm bank by something that never let him move and induced either images of an asexual encounter or something, but that he knew that he ejaculated, but there was never any sperm on his body or anywhere else. It was being collected. Could this be an advanced holographic technology that I was referring to earlier, used to test our minds and emotions for alien purposes, that no hole opened up in this wall? Or was it a reality, another reality, a glimpse into another reality that is able to somehow, in some places, at some times, penetrate our third-dimensional space? Could it be an interdimensional penetration from something so advanced that it can reach into our universe from a place as unimaginable as a universe next door that we have never yet identified? When the hole opened in his apartment wall, the man thought that he was seeing where they came from. But even as he looked, he could see himself staring back from another hole in another wall across the control room operated by one of those small grays in those blue leotards. It was in their reality, he thought, but it was as if he were looking in a mirror, seeing himself looking through a door, and the only thing that was common between where he was in his New York apartment and what he was looking at was the gray working at some kind of a console in between himself and the image of himself looking back through a window. The abductee asked me, how could I be in their world looking back at myself here? Is their world even in this universe? Fred Alan Wolf, who writes about a new cosmology emerging from quantum physics, speculates, I imagine parallel universes as parallel neural reflections of this universe. And in each universe, I can imagine a question about why this universe is different from all other universes. An even more urgent question to us humans is why would an advanced intelligence from any universe, here or someplace else, want to genetically mix its species with ours? And where would all these hybrids live? What does the government, any government, know about all this? In 1983, at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, an Air Force Office of Special Investigations officer named Richard C. Doty showed me an alleged, quote, briefing paper for the President of the United States of America on the subject of identified aerial vehicles. The paper began with a listing of our government's retrieval operations of UFO craft and alien bodies from several locations in the southwestern United States and northern Mexico in the 1940s to 1950s. Where has our government in the United States hidden all these craft and bodies? Do other governments in other countries also have hidden craft and bodies? According to confidential military and intelligence sources, they are in a variety of underground installations, at least in the United States, particularly one place called S4 Area 51 at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. There in December 1988, a scientist named Robert Lazar was assigned to analyze the propulsion system on a silver disc. He said it was one of 9 different discs being studied in engineering bays inside of a mountain range called the Papoose Mountains. During the production for my Fox special, UFO Report Sightings, we interviewed Bob, and this is what he said on this next video.
Is conducting top-secret research into UFOs in the middle of the Nevada desert. South of a dry lake bed known as Area 51 is a place known as S4, allegedly home to a super-secret government research facility. In the course of our investigation, we found a scientist who says he used to work there. Robert Lazar was shocked when he first discovered what it was he would be working on.
Got out of the bus, I was told to walk directly through the hangar, and immediately, even before entering the hangar, you can see the edge of a disc. This is your classic flying saucer, 2 inverted pie plates, if you wish, with a segmented, larger area dome on top. Within minutes of that, I finally realized that this had nothing to do with something the government was producing. And that was quite shocking because everything inside was small. This is a full-size craft, 30, 35 feet in diameter, maybe 40. But you're looking at seats that are, 18 inches off the ground, obviously made, for something smaller. It certainly wasn't made for children to play in.
Lazar says there were 9 spaceships in all, and he claims to have seen one fly.
It began to lift off the ground almost silently. There was a hiss sound, like a corona discharge you could hear around high voltage systems, accompanied by a faint, it probably would have been brighter at night, a faint blue glow around the bottom. As the craft approached about 30 feet, 20 feet, something like that off the ground, that corona discharge disappeared. The sound stopped and the craft stood there silently and slowly drifted over to the left and then to the right.
The government denies they're testing alien craft at S4. Lazar no longer works there and nowadays spends his time working on one of his hobbies, jet car racing. He alleges that after he went public, security officers at the base threatened his life. He also says that his employment and military service records have disappeared. Despite repeated requests, the government can't find them. The subcontractor who hired him for the job at S4 refuses to comment. But a few clues support Lazar's contention that he is a scientist and that he has worked for the government. This W-2 form indicates that he had been employed by the Department of Naval Intelligence. Before his stint at S4, Lazar claims to have worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Los Alamos officials can't find any record of him, but his name does appear in a laboratory phone book from that time. Reporter George Knapp was able to track down a few of Lazar's colleagues who could confirm parts of his story. But when they talked to Knapp, something strange happened.
One after another had visits from government personnel who basically intimidated or told them to back off, followed them around. There didn't have to be any direct communication where an agent says, you keep talking to this guy, you're going to end up in a river. The message was very clear.
Since Lazar's story broke, Area 51 has become a hotbed for UFO sightings.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are you seeing this thing zip back and forth, or is it just... You see that? It just zips to the left. See it again?
While our cameras were there, a bright light appeared in the night sky. Utterly silent, it seemed to float below the mountaintops. Analysis of our videotape proved inconclusive. Those who might know the answers aren't talking.
I've been covering organized crime in Las Vegas for 10 years, dealing with mob hitmen and mob informants, people who have been in the witness protection program. The fear that is generated by this UFO subject for people who really know about it far outweighs the kind of fear that the mob inspires. I mean, people are more afraid of our government than they are of organized crime.
I am exactly sure of what I saw. I know what mainstream science is like. I know where physics stands. I know all of that. And this is an extraterrestrial craft. This technology is hundreds and hundreds of years in advance of us, and that's the end of that story.
And the video. After the broadcast, an anonymous male voice left a message on my phone machine, and I said, I think the information you presented was good, but you are off the track on a few things. You, meaning Lazar, mentioned that the aliens were hundreds of years ahead in technology. Actually, it would be more like thousands of years, and last year there was another man who was in his 70s dying of emphysema and told me the government knows they're millions of years in advance. The ships don't have windows as we know windows to be. The craft are smooth and metallic colored. Lazar told me privately that 2 men have been working in one of this craft, that he was supposed to at least look at the propulsion system. And that they did something in the floor of this craft. And all of a sudden, he said, standing, looking out, there were vertical panels that just, like clear. He said it was beyond looking through air. He said it was so clear. And then they did something else on the floor, and it went back to the solid silver skin. So whatever it is, I guess the closest word we'd have if something was polarizing, I don't know. But that it could go clear and look like a window, and then go opaque. And maybe what this man is referring to, I don't know. He continued, they have no intention of hurting anyone. There will be increased sightings, very increased sightings in the future. The blood from the animals that you were talking about is not being used to make things compatible with people, as it is being developed for, shall we say, to save the animals against radiation poisoning. The government does not have ships in working order, but does have the remains of some. There was a survivor, but I don't know if that person is still living. The truth of the matter is that if the reason for their visiting the planet were revealed, the public could not handle it, unquote. What is it that the public cannot handle that perpetuates an apparent government policy of silence, not only in the United States, but in at least some other countries? Is there one major intelligence behind all these events? Or are there competing species from somewhere else out there? Maybe species even in conflict? Could there be a secret war around and above us? One government employee in the intelligence security business asked me in 1990 if I knew what Earth's secret war was about. According to him, he had encountered a discussion about alien involvement in this planet while working on a clandestine mission in Washington, D.C. from 1985 to 1987. Those discussions included the cloning of human beings and a reference to, quote, Earth's secret war, which he did not understand, and he wondered if I knew what that was about. I told him that I did not know. Are these people who come to some of us with secret information witting or unwitting misinformers? Or are there legitimate leaks in the government and military who have seen or heard enough to be angry or repulsed at the exclusion of the public from the biggest story of all time? Whether or not there is a secret war is one of the key pieces to understanding the UFO mystery, that at least some of the alien intelligence intruding on this planet is not strictly biological from the solar system next door. Is it possible that interactions with Homo sapien are done partly with holographic technology that can enter bedrooms, cars, pastures, and backyards? We think we are dealing with solid biology, but what about the Bigfoot in Montana that disappeared in a flash of light when a rancher shot at it in 1976? Or the images of translucent beings that have been reported? If anything is translucent, can it be strictly biological? Or is it affecting some kind of a physics that we still have not discovered? A new cosmology is emerging from both the abduction experiences and quantum physics that boils down to this. There are many more dimensions than we can imagine, that Earth exists in one particular dimension that has a particular atomic frequency, that other frequency forms from other dimensions can penetrate and even overlap our space-time, just as different radio and TV signals move together in a single space to be separated at a receiver by a frequency tuner. This universe that is approximately 20 billion light years across is not the only one, according to this new cosmology, that there is an infinite number of other universes which can be radically different from ours in both appearance and physical makeup. And the alien phenomenon, whatever it is forcing glimpses of other realities upon us. whether it's in crop circles, abductions, or animal mutilations. Some researchers are convinced that humanity is property, that we belong to something else that experiments with and tests us like lab animals, communicating with and controlling us by various frequencies of light and sound. The Black American Indian abductee in New Jersey is convinced that our entire planet is a spiritual experiment. She believes that Homo sapien were originally created to be someone else's workforce on Earth, to mine minerals and do physical labor for a tall race of beings who have been harvesting our planet for eons. She says that was the original Garden of Eden, where the man and woman toiled in innocence before the tall gods, until a mysterious reptile had them eat from the tree of knowledge. Who was that serpent? Was it another civilization from somewhere out there in the cosmos who decided to try their own experiment here? Perhaps one in which the challenge was to evolve an animal into a being with the heart of an angel? Why the chronic harvest of genetic material from Earth life, both humans and animals? If we are an experiment, are there checkpoints, cycles in our Earth time when the experimenters review their creation to determine if goals have been achieved, and if not, what happens? Whatever the ultimate truth of our primal existence was, or what our future destiny is, I think it is long overdue for us in 1993 to face the fact that we are not alone in this universe. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know it's late, but I'd be more than happy to take 2 or 3 questions.
How long have you involved in our work?
I'm sorry?
How long have you involved in our work now?
4 times. There were 4 different days of work. He went out there for the first time in December, I think it was, of 1988. He went back there 3 subsequent times at the beginning of 1989 up till March. As he understood it, and as George Knapp has researched this, this was very typical of how IG&G, which was the connecting company, would have handled the beginning of a person that they were testing in various areas. As he said, no one was showing me everything or telling me everything, but they were like getting him exposed to what he would be working with and seeing his reactions. That was his personal interpretation of the 4 times, including being where the engineering bays were in that mountain, and seeing 9 different styles in which there were 2 people per craft working. And he said there were all kinds of security guards with guns, and that no one was allowed to talk. And he thought it was the most anti-productive atmosphere he had ever encountered, and it made him angry. Yes, sir?
Linda, how has Bob Lazar and his credibility stood up to the disinformation campaign?
He's asking about Bob Lazar's credibility, the fact that Bob did once upon a time have a part ownership or a part involvement in a house of prostitution in Nevada. That was when Bob Lazar was married. His wife actually, it's a very tragic story, that during some of the pressure in Bob's life, his wife died, and it's a personal story and affected him very much. Later, according to him, he was hired by the same woman that he and his wife had known when they owned part of this brothel in Nevada, which here in England may sound horrible, but in the United States, in Nevada, houses of prostitution are as common as slot machines. It's just a question of where they are or are not legal, and it happens to be in the city of Las Vegas, that inside the city perimeter, you cannot be actively operating a house of prostitution. The woman that Bob was doing the computer accounting work for, that was his involvement, had a brothel inside the city limits of Las Vegas. As he and George Knapp and others of us, we have come to the conclusion that somebody wanted very much to put Bob Lazar in prison, to get him out of the way, and he was not really guilty of anything that was serious, but somebody tried to make it serious, and fortunately, it didn't work. He is alive and well in Las Vegas. He continues to do some very interesting work, and in the next 2 years, it is possible that one of the major studios in Los Angeles will do his life story and his work inside that mountain as a major feature film. We all hope so, because regardless of whether Bob Lazar is a person who has not lived a tidy, neat life, I believe, and so does George Knapp, that he's been trying to tell the truth to the best of his ability. And he's the first to say, I have never been a saint. I'll take one over here in the far back.
Yeah, you mentioned the large nose, gentlemen.
Yes.
You mentioned there was a video, it's supposed to be from a video film. Did I understand this correctly?
Yes.
Have you seen this? Does it
Yes.
exist?
Yeah, I mean, there's no mystery about this. In the United States, back in the 1974 time period, the documentary, it is a documentary, it's called, anybody want to write this down because it's important that you do not get the titles mixed up. UFOs, Past, Present, and Future was the first documentary, unedited, that contained the drawing of the being. That documentary matched the 1974 edition of the book, which is the only book that ever had the drawing. Every subsequent edition of the book did not have the drawing. In 1979, the film was re-edited and redistributed as a documentary in the United States, perhaps other countries, but it was retitled UFOs, It Has Begun. That is the title that you can do inquiry. UFOs, It Has Begun. Now, Michael Hesseman from Germany is involved with video distributions. Michael, do you know in Europe if anybody is distributing UFOs, It Has Begun? Okay, so you could make inquiry in the United States.
That's been available. That's been available in Britain. I bought a copy in London about 3 years ago, but it's been imported. I don't know from where. It's very restricted.
It is restricted, but here's
you can't get it very many places. I don't think anybody's working to restrict it. I think it's just...
Well, I know, it's just distribution as an issue, but you have been able to get it in PAL at a bookstore or as a video store in London.
I've got a VHS copy. I mean, it might have started life as a pirate or something.
Okay, so for those of you who might be interested in tracking this down, you might be able to find out how to get it through some sort of a large video store in London. Yes?
Yeah, I'd just like to say UFOs, it has begun. I managed to pick it up from Littlewoods, which is basically a high street store.
Okay, so there's another tip. Another.
Bob Lazar claims to have seen these UFOs. Are these the same UFOs that were recovered, the crashed craft that during the 1950s to 60s period? And if so, are we to believe that these craft that are piloted by more intelligent beings, said yourself, hundreds of years more advanced than us, thousands of years, maybe millions of years more advanced, they travel through time and space, and yet when they get to this planet, it's whoops, here comes a mountain. You know, what's going on? You know?
In my book, yes, I understand your point. In my book, An Alien Harvest, in my own epilogue, I stab a paragraph in there and say that it makes more logical sense that whatever these crash disks were about, they were programmed and planned by whatever the intelligence is to place these disks in our hands.
Right. And also, like, to put a point across that if we do have a craft kept under wraps, how is it possible that, I mean, take, for instance, drugs are smuggled all the time, and the government captures these drugs, and yet these drugs end up on the black market. Now, if you can imagine the price on a piece of this metal that, from these crafts that would fetch on the black market, how come someone hasn't bought these on the black market? I don't think they exist. I don't think they do. I don't think we can keep it secret. And I'm sure somebody would try and sell them.
I'm sure you all have your opinions, and it doesn't matter. I'm not a proselytizer. I'm a journalist, not here to lay out what we have researched. Is there another question over here? And is there another question over here? Yes.
Can I just ask what specifically Bob Lazar was
supposed to do? I mean, what was his expertise? Was he expected to help put this craft together?
No.
Thousands of years in
No,
advance?
no. According to him, there were 9 different shapes, silver, in 9 different engineering bays. Neither he nor the senior partner that he was assigned to could go out of the engineering bay they were assigned. He only saw as if there were a half a block with walls, and all he could see would be angles. That's as close as he ever got. He's never claimed anything else. When he was taken into the engineering bay where he was assigned, he said that this particular craft was up on some kind of stanchions, and they told him, they gave him a short period of time to go down some stairs that had been constructed so that somebody could get down below this object that was built up. They had put things under it so they could get down under it. So he said he was allowed approximately 60 seconds to look under it, and he was allowed approximately 2 or 3 minutes to actually go into an opening where there were 2 men with some kind of a hole in the floor doing something either for him, his benefit, he did not know, and he saw these panels on what he thought was a solid object just suddenly go crystal clear, and then they closed back up. And they told him that what they were trying to do was to understand the propulsion system of this particular craft that had no moving parts. This is what leads into a story that some of you may or may not have read in some of Tim Good's work here about the so-called element 115, gravity waves, the focus of gravity waves, and all of that. Now, Bob Lazar has never said to me or to George Knapp or to anyone that he fully understands anything, but he was impressed by the fact that whatever these objects were in these engineering bays, he thought they'd been there for a very, very long time, and that no one seemed to know much of anything. So they would be like preserved in a museum, that certain teams of people with certain specific talents were brought in under heavy security, signed security oaths up the kazoo. Now that's the funny thing. Lazar, as he said, was given an orientation. He's not like working 9 to 5 out there at Papoose. He's being given an orientation through these 4 trips out there, darkened bus windows and all of that. Would this have been, and some people have hypothesized, and Bob has even wondered, did all this happen to just see what his reaction would be and see if he would actually, because of his iconoclastic personality, leak? But that he would leak in such a way that they knew that he was a character that could be discredited, even though the more you know Lazar, he's a very honest dude. He's very honest. Well, that's another possibility. Or they were actually giving him an orientation and that he actually was going to be assigned to a team that was going to be trying to deal with a very bizarre propulsion system that still today no one understood. If the latter is true, it means that the government in the United States doesn't understand what's going on with those craft either. Okay.
Gentleman here.
On a slightly different tack, have you ever looked at kind of secret society type things like Illuminati, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry and things like this? I know it's perhaps going off in a different kind of tangent. But so I've seen kind of a lot of kind of psychological parallels between this kind of like initiation into other dimensions type of stuff. What are parallels there?
This man is asking about the whole association of the historic references of the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, and secret doctrines and sects in relationship to the phenomena we've all been discussing the last 2 days. And what I could share with you is a personal experience that I had with J. Allen Hynek before he died. I think it is extremely interesting. He died of a brain tumor, I think it was in April of 1986, and I had had dinner with him in August of 1985 before I went on a trip to Africa. That's why I remember it so specifically. And prior to that dinner in that year, he had taken me aside at a conference where we had been speakers, and he said, Linda, I think we really should let our hair down with each other. And I thought, oh my God, I'm finally going to hear everything that J. Allen Hynek really knows. So we stayed up talking till about 2 o'clock in the morning, but instead of talking about discs and bodies and all of that, he said to me, you know, I am a Rosicrucian. And he said, when I was a teenager, I became very interested in the occult. And he said, you might understand more about this phenomenon if you would read a book that I consider to be the most important book I'd ever read. This is Heinz talking to me. And he said that the book was Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner. And at the time, I was not familiar at all with any of that work. And when I got the book and I started reading about other frequencies, other dimensional realities, angels, I remember my reaction was, what in the world? What is he trying to tell me here? Well, Hynek is dead. He's in another space somewhere. And maybe that was a gift to me, to let me know that even he, coming from an astronomy background, with all of his bitterness about what the Air Force did in misusing him, or his allowing himself to be misused in disinformation, that we are dealing with a phenomenon which Jacques Vallée and others would say at least amounts to a control system. And that in the ultimate evolution of all of this, that maybe someday that the truth we are going to begin to learn is that this has something to do with the unseen part of ourselves and the yet unseen